Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of the Greens on the Fair Trading Legislation Amendment Consumer Guarantee Directions Bill and offer the Greens support for this bill. As we have heard, and I won't go through the details again, the bill does make a number of changes that will assist consumers when it comes to issues around faulty or problematic goods that they consume, and will allow them to avoid the, as we've heard, the sometimes intimidating, sometimes stressful, sometimes inaccessible processes that is NCAT to be able to resolve small claim disputes, issuing a consumer guarantee direction. It is that in application will be to goods over $25 and less than $3,000, and there are a number of requirements of that. I also note that the bill will introduce new powers for investigators to seize and remove goods that are non-compliant with safety standards, subject to a recall or ban, or otherwise deemed unsafe by the investigator. And can I just say that is particularly welcome as a change, and something that I know has been raised in a number of different forums, and particularly I know that it is a regular and hot topic of discussion on the Inner West Mums group when it comes to the consumption of various goods that may or may not have safety warnings. And having been someone that angsted for a long time over which pram to buy, and then eventually let choice make the decision for me because I didn't trust any of the corporate communications that were happening around the pram that I bought for my daughter. I do note that it is actually that this legislation has the support of choice in relation to the improvements to consumers, and I think that that is a sign and demonstrates the fact that when it comes to this piece of legislation, the fact that we have multi-partisan support in this chamber for this legislation and the support of Choice for this bill, which Choice being the leading community consumer advocacy organisation who were consulted and provide support. It demonstrates that this is a change that is in the interests of the people that live in this state, and I share the member for Heffron's surprise that it is surprised that we see a bit of legislation coming to this chamber that does appear to be in the interests of the people that live in New South Wales, rather than the corporate vested interests that usually we see legislation coming to this chamber for when it comes to what we see from the Liberals and Nationals. But hey, it's a rare occasion that occurs, but all credit to the fact that we are here standing up for those people that are vulnerable. We do acknowledge that in introducing this power for the Commissioner to introduce consumer guarantee directions, it is a positive and efficient method to enhance consumer protection, and hopefully what we'll see out of that is also suppliers and corporations being held to account by actually not trying to get away with the provision of these dodgy goods in the first place. And I think that leads to a whole lot of other issues and challenges we have in our community at this time around the idea of waste and consumer waste, and the fact that people are buying goods that are faulty, and then because of the low cost of them are getting rid of them, and then the cost to the environment and to our society is huge. So hopefully we'll see changes that actually improve the quality of those goods such that consumers aren't needing to use this over time. I would also like to acknowledge the fact that we are putting this out here does also acknowledge that NCAT, the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, does actually prove in many cases to be a barrier for consumers and others that have to engage in that process. And I would like to put on the record the fact that NCAT has been notoriously neglected and under-resourced by successive governments who have ignored the role of NCAT when it comes to ensuring justice over a broad range of issues, ranging from consumer protection to anti-discrimination to employment to equal opportunity, tenancy, guardianship, gaming and liquor, health, child protection, water, and the list goes on. The Greens recognise that the role of NCAT is crucial in providing access to justice to the community, and we will continue to advocate for increased investment in NCAT and in the recognition of its role in administering civil justice. I do want to point out two particular areas that I think are made clear by the fact that this Minister, the Minister for Better Regulation and Innovation, is identifying that the process of NCAT can actually be hugely intimidating for people for a range of reasons, and we've heard speakers on the government benches talk about the risks to people that from diverse communities where English might not be their first language. There may be a range of reasons why NCAT is a very intimidating and challenging process, and I would urge and ask if there's any contribution the Minister and his department can do to recognise the fact that public housing tenants are actually regularly subjected to having to go through the NCAT process to be able to deal with maintenance requests and other issues, and that vulnerable renters are also required to have to go through the NCAT process when it comes to standing up around issues where dodgy landlords are doing things to them. That the same issues, the same reality applies for those people, that actually the NCAT process is very intimidating. It can be quite stressful and quite confronting to have people have to stand up for their own rights through that process. And so anything that can be done to actually look at the recognition of the issues around putting vulnerable people in the need to stand up to NCAT to assist some of the most vulnerable people in our community that are public housing tenants that are having to engage with this process on a regular basis would be very welcome. And similarly, those people that try to engage with GIPPers and freedom of information requests that also have to go to NCAT. The resourcing of NCAT is crucial, and while I appreciate that in this bill what we are trying to do is make it easier for some people to have to not engage with that process, I do think that in hearing the reasons for why we support this bill and the introduction of it, we are hearing reasons for why public housing tenants, people that are engaged with having to stand up against unfair evictions and rent increases to NCAT, there are a range of people that are still vulnerable about these processes. Part of that is about strengthening the resources and providing support within the NCAT system to make that more efficient for people, to make it work for people. Part of it is also about recognising that some individuals need support and recognition and assistance from the government that allows them to be able to resolve their complaints outside of that administrative tribunal and the civil tribunal process. So I very much offer the Greens support for this. I hope that some of the reflections on the risks and the intimidatory nature of the NCAT can be considered in relation to the fact that many public housing tenants have to use NCAT to be able to get basic maintenance done to their property as a result of the failures of the Family and Community Services Minister and her department when it comes to treating and delivering on their responsibilities for public housing tenants. I would like to end by putting an urge out to say that we have seen in this bill the willingness of the Minister and this department to stand up against what would be, I imagine, loud opposition from certain interest groups in the interests of the community. We know that there are many renters in this state that would love them to show the same strength and courage and commitment to stand up on the side of the people and provide reforms through the Residential Tenancies Act to end no grounds evictions in this state. And I urge them to take the enthusiasm with which they stand up around consumer protections and do the same for renters in this state. Thank you. I commend the bill.